This month we are talking about love. We're talking about seeing clearly the divine as a pervasive, inclusive energy, and we call that love, but not like human love. We started talking about that in the first week of January. And by the way, if you missed any of the January series, they're all available to view in video form at our website, and also you can subscribe to our audio podcasts or the video. So you can dip in and see all of the previous weeks. The second week of January, we talked about the role that devotion plays. And then in the third week, we talked about faith. And today we are talking about altruism, which is similar to compassion, but with some important differences. So let's begin looking at compassion first. The beauty of compassion is that it grows out of a shared or perceived shared experience with other people. When we feel with other people, that's the com in compassion. It means with others. You know, like what many of us probably felt when we heard the news of the fires in Australia. Because we've been through something like that. And then when the news of the three United States firefighters who lost their lives helping out there in Australia, when then that came about, most likely we could connect with that loss. Even though it's on another continent, it's close to home. It's close to our hearts. The dictionary defines compassion as a deep awareness of the suffering of another sentient being, coupled with a wish to relieve that suffering. That's compassion. To feel with and to want to do something about it. Now let's look at altruism. Altruism is a little different because it grows from a personal desire to express such things as goodness, loving kindness, respect, welcome, whether or not there is a trigger event, whether or not there is a tragedy or a need. I may not have had the same experience as you. I may not understand your pain or suffering. I may not get what you're going through. I may not know a single thing about you. And yet, still, I long to express loving kindness because that's what I do. See, altruism then is not necessarily a response to distress. It can be. But what makes altruism different is that it is driven by this deep longing to express your true, innate, spiritual self as loving kindness. The word altruism, it came into being in the 1800s. The word actually comes from an Italian word, altrui, which means other people or someone else. And in the 1800s, it was used to mean the opposite of egoism. Altruism out, egoism in. To illustrate, maybe you remember that movement, Random Acts of Kindness. Oh, it's spread all through our country, through the world rapidly. The classic example is paying for the person behind you when you get to the toll at the bridge, Remember when we used to have to slow down and pay with cash? Kevin shared with me yesterday that in his late teens, he worked in a drive-through at a coffee shop. And one day, a driver came to the window and asked to pay for the person behind, the next person to pay for their coffee. And then that carried on. And then 15 people later, 15 cars, it kept on going. And then car number 16 didn't pay for the next person. But Kevin was so excited about it that he paid for the next car. And then it went on for another 15 cars, Oh, my goodness. Thinking about it, though, each driver in their drive-thru didn't know a single thing about the person behind them. They didn't know if that person behind them was suffering or sad or economically challenged or distressed. They didn't know if the person behind them was happy or excited or late or calm. In a way, the kindness had little to do with the person who received it. That's altruism. It's like the love of the divine. It's indiscriminate. On the website for Random Acts of Kindness, there's a short story called Just a Little Thing. During the rush and bustle of the Christmas holiday, I slipped into the local coffee shop drive-thru. My paycheck was pretty much spent, and my kids and I still had grocery shopping to do. In the rearview mirror, I noticed a pickup truck with a father and a small son. Impulsively, when at the window paying for my bill, I also asked to pay for the bill for the truck behind me. My kids asked why. And I explained about how doing a kind thing was more for me than for the receiver, though I also hoped he enjoyed it. My kids wondered as to the timing as we were off to the bank to see our balance before hitting the grocery store. Much to my surprise, there was more money than expected. We had overpaid on mortgage taxes through the year, and the bank had deposited the surcharge back into our account just that morning. Coincidence? Maybe. But I can't help thinking that when you share yourself, you always get back so much more. So altruism doesn't have to be reactive. It can be proactive. See, I don't have to wait for a need to appear before I express my love. I don't have to wait for something to trigger my generosity before I'm generous. No, I can reframe it now. I give because that's what I do. I love because that's what I do. I'm kind because that's what I do, or even better, because that is what the divine mind in me is all about. It has nothing to do with whether or not you deserve it. Maybe I paraphrase Matthew 5, I think it's verse 44 and 45, in which it says something like this: be sure to love your enemies. Be sure to pray for those who bully you. Because that way, you're duplicating what the divine does. That's how you express your divine inheritance. Because after all, the divine makes the sun to rise for good people and not so good people, on all people, regardless of their race or their gender or their culture or their religion or their anything, regardless of whether or not they deserve it. So be like that. You know, you're being altruistic when you don't require anything in return. You don't even require recognition or acknowledgement or appreciation. You don't even require the recipient to know it was you. That's right where my ego gets into it, gets in the way, because sometimes I do want to be recognized. I want to know that you appreciate it. Right? So I had to balance out that need for recognition. I would do that by playing this game. I think I've told you about this before. I would secretly pay for someone else's dinner when I was at a restaurant. And then I noticed I was watching how they would respond. So I had to work out a deal with the waitstaff and ask them to pay after I'd left. So I couldn't see how they reacted or tell them about it. So instead I tell you. Aren't we cute? And altruism is not always a gift, and it's not always an act of kindness. It can also be an act of attitude, of prayer, of intention, of blessing. For example, go to the grocery store, go to the supermarket, go to the farmer's market, go to a park, go somewhere. And as you walk about, do what we did this morning. Tune into the presence. Feel the love. Not your personal love, the love. And then begin to focus your loving kindness on random strangers, whether they deserve it or not. Just love them. Imagine them happy on their terms. Imagine them well on their terms. And don't tell a living soul what you're doing. Oh, you're going to get high. One of my favorite authors, Hugh Prather, in his book, The Quiet Answer, writes this. Who really knows the effect of one happy thought? Is it possible that it circles the globe, finding entry into any open heart, encouraging and giving hope in some unseen way? I'm convinced it does. For whenever I am truly loving, I feel the warmth and the presence of the like-minded, a growing family whose strength lies in their gentleness and whose message is in their treatment of others. Another quality of altruism, I believe, is that it doesn't wait for circumstances to be right. It doesn't wait for things to all be in place and sorted out. It doesn't wait for things to get better. It's always there in us. You might say it is our real self. And if you want to bring altruism alive in your life, you can start by practicing one of the simplest, most innocent forms of altruism. Common courtesy. Yeah. Let other people go first, whether they deserve it or not. Say please and thank you. Be nice. Some people don't like that word nice because it conjures up images of fakeness, insincerity. Maybe you've heard that phrase, don't be nice, be real. I had to really think about that. Because I understand when it's important to have boundaries, don't just make nice to avoid speaking up truthfully or to avoid conflict. I get that, I understand that. And I wonder if being real could also mean being true to my spiritual nature. I'm made in the image and likeness of the divine, like you. So I am my best self when I'm expressing that. I'm powerful and clear and connected and wise when I'm duplicating the nature of the divine. When I'm being real this way, I'm super nice. Not pretend, fake, plastic flowers nice. Real nice, authentically. So I had to look up some synonyms for the word nice. Found them. Friendly, generous, warm-hearted, understanding, charitable, humane, considerate, forbearing, tolerant, big-hearted, agreeable, beneficial. And I asked myself the question, what would being real look like without kindness, without big-heartedness, without generosity of spirit? Or how would I show up in the world if being real to me meant with more kindness, with more big-heartedness, with more connection, with more generosity of spirit, with more bravery, with more caring, with more sharing, with more of what the divine in me already is. When I moved into a new neighborhood several years ago, a neighbor brought to my front door a plate of homemade cookies. I can't tell you how much that meant to me, because I hadn't even slowed down enough in all of the moving to notice that there were other living beings close by. Then years later, I moved to another neighborhood. No cookies. Nothing came to the door. And I went, maybe it's my turn. So I started to make an effort to pay attention, to notice, to connect with the neighbors. Another one of my favorite authors, Chris Ben-Guri, in his book Beyond Courage, writes this: we must slow down and notice the people around us and then get to know them. We need to take the time to see our friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, and even people on the streets as human beings who all possess the same emotions, concerns, fears, and loves that we do. Once we accomplish that, we can communicate and bond with them through those commonalities. Eventually, the barriers of fear, hatred, and hurtfulness will dissipate, and they will be replaced with our common goal, happiness. Again, I stress we must take the time to do this every day in our hustle and bustle, not just occasionally when it is convenient to do so. So your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to go about the world this week stealthily, sneakily, loving people without telling a single soul what you're up to. Now, your take-home prayer today, and you know the routine, you have to come and get it from me, comes from Ernest Holmes, and it is to support this work. So I invite you to breathe in and to exhale as you let these words reverberate through your whole being as if they are your very own words. I am never alone, never lonely, for I have as companions and friends those people who are drawn to me by the ever-active spiritual laws of the universe. I desire to be loved. Therefore, I allow myself to love greatly, to feel warmly inclined towards others, and to be interested in them and helpful on their behalf. I give as I wish to receive. It is not enough that I profess to love people. I must really love people more dearly than I have ever loved before, because after all are part of my spiritual family. I do not outline who shall be my friends, acquaintances, and companions, for there is no desire in me to coerce, to control, to compel, or to suggest anything to anyone. Spiritual law brings into contact and relationship with me all those people in whose company I find the greatest enjoyment and to whom I may give the most. I am happy and radiant, for I always enjoy perfect companionship with the living Spirit within me, and I trust implicitly its law to bring into my environment and into my atmosphere friends and acquaintances and loved ones, even strangers, and to establish for me a community of interest and helpfulness. I love and cooperate with my world, and so does my world love and cooperate with me. I'm happy in all my connections because, after all, they are being worked out perfectly by spiritual law, and that law is set into motion for me by my love of others. I invite you to let the next breath you take be deeper than the one before, followed by a sigh as we bring this moment of contemplation to a close.